development at all levels. What exactly do we mean by infrastructure, and in what ways does it aid and accelerate development? A populace that understands this will be in a better position to hold their representatives and office holders accountable and demand that basic and necessary infrastructure be put in place. This is one way government can create an enabling environment that activates the economy of each state. And while this sounds basic, it may be at the root of our problems. Today, on the Parliament, we paint the picture of the type of infrastructural investment we want to see in the Southeast and go ahead to demand for it. Infrastructural deficit in the Southeast and its varied effects will be the central idea of the Parliament this beautiful Thursday morning. I am Uche Gabriel. Welcome to the Parliament. Development at all levels. What exactly do we mean by infrastructure, and in what ways does it aid and accelerate development? A populace that understands this will be in a better position to hold their representatives and office holders accountable and demand that basic and necessary infrastructure be put in place. This is one way government can create an enabling environment that activates the economy of each state. And while this sounds basic, it may be at the root of our problems. Today, on the Parliament, we paint the picture of the type of infrastructural investment we want to see in the Southeast and go ahead to demand for it. Infrastructural deficit in the Southeast and its varied effects will be the central idea of the Parliament this beautiful Thursday morning. I am Uche Gabriel. Welcome to the Parliament. Joining me this morning to debate this all-important subject is Tony Odukwe. Tony Odukwe is a business development consultant and MD, Defcom Foods Limited. He has about 20 years experience in international trade, which cuts across three continents. Tony Odukwe, good to have you again.
Always good to be here, Uche.
Okay, let's get it done. And later in the show, we will be joined by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale, and he will be giving us an overview of federal projects and infrastructure. And today, he will not be in a hurry to face the questions that will come from the parliamentarians. He remains, for now, our closest shot at the presidency. Tony Odukwe, let's get the discussion started. Now, every day we come on the Parliament, I ask this question, and nobody will discourage me from asking it, and I'll keep asking it until I get a clear answer. Is it that most of our leaders don't know the significance of infrastructure? Because I wonder, why will it take Abia State and the governor there this long to fix the roads surrounding Abia, knowing that Abia is an African hub? I mean, it's not just a Nigerian thing. People come from Cameroon and the neighboring countries to buy.
That's right.
Why will it take us this long if we really know what infrastructure does to development?
Uche, it's a number of things, actually. You know, the last time I was here, I talked about a lack of self-respect, dignity, and
honor.
Yeah, honor. You know, that's number one that comes to mind. There are a number of other things. Know-how, a lack of know-how, plays a vital role there, an important role there. But I'll take the first. You know, I made this analogy the last time with my room. You know. Okay, so let me not do my room. Let's say you. Let's say, okay, fine. You walk.
Well, you can do your room again.
Okay, let's choose this office, right?
Okay.
And so you had invited me to come here for this interview today, right? Now, because you're a respectable person, and because you have self-esteem and you want to paint a good picture, that's who you are. That's how you're raised.
Okay.
That impressions people have about you matter, right? And so what you've done is that I've walked into an office that is clean, everything properly arranged. Now, don't take that for granted, because somebody else would do the invite, and I could walk here with and see the pure water sachets, used pure water sachets laying all over the floor. Now, it's a thing about that person's character. It's a thing about that person's mindset that doesn't really see the abnormality of his environment. And so he doesn't really care that there's dirt on the floor, right? That person that kind of person almost always doesn't have self-respect and dignity. And so they don't care what my immediate environment says about me, right? So that's number one problem that our politicians have. And so why do we have a cluster of people that are like that in government? It's because of the people they have served who eventually put them in office. Now, remember, corruption was institutionalized, like I said earlier, a couple of days ago, in Africa. Now, the reason corruption was institutionalized in Africa is that the European came here, took over our countries and became our colonial masters. When the world started making a lot of noise about it and said it was time for Africa to be liberated, smart people, what they did was they decided we're going to leave. But of course, they cannot leave Africa alone because of its wealth and resources. So what do? We're going to timidly walk away, but we're going to put people in place who will ensure that we perpetuate the principle of indirect rule. And so for things to continue to work as normal and all the resources continue to come to Europe, what do? Make sure that these are not people who have the right kind of mentality, people who do want their countries to work. So who did they put there? Some touts, some politicians who probably didn't have degrees. Even if they had degrees, they didn't have self-respect. So they made those people leaders. We see this happen all over Africa. That's what happened in Rwanda that led to the genocide a couple of years ago. When the British left, they gave leadership over to the more malleable ethnicity there, so as to make sure that they continue to reap their benefits from Rwanda. It happened in Nigeria. When they left here, they gave over rulership to the more malleable ethnicity. And so corruption has continued ever since. And so what they said is, as long as you guys keep the channel open for resources to continue to go to Africa, we won't bother you. Steal all the money you want. Do whatever you want. Carry out all the human rights abuses you want. We're not going to bat an eye. And so the first set of politicians in Nigeria lived like that. And so when they retired, they enthroned some other people who they had thought to live like that. And so that attitude to leadership has been handed down from generation to generation to the crop of politicians we have today. So you see that these people were raised by people who didn't have self-respect, people who didn't have dignity, and people who who do not care whatsoever, for humanity. So that's number one. The other part is the lack of know-how. A lot of the same people do not have the set of skills that it takes, number one, to lead a nation. Number two, to manage a nation's resources. Number three, to make things work and grow GDP. A lot of them just don't know this. And so you don't expect anybody to give something they don't have. So that's why we must emphasize on putting our leaders in position through a proper electoral process and not through the cabal system that we have today. That's actually what's hurting our economy.
Now, if they don't know, that's a problem, but it's not a...
They gave leadership over to the more malleable ethnicity there, so as to make sure that they continue to reap their benefits from Rwanda. It happened in Nigeria. When they left here, they gave over rulership to the more malleable ethnicity. And so corruption has continued ever since. And so what they said is, as long as you guys keep the channel open for resources to continue to go to Africa, we won't bother you. Steal all the money you want. Do whatever you want. Carry out all the human rights abuses you want. We're not going to bat an eye. And so the first set of politicians in Nigeria lived like that. And so when they retired, they enthroned some other people who they had thought to live like that. And so that attitude to leadership has been handed down from generation to the generation to the crop of politicians we have today. So you see that these people were raised by people who didn't have self-respect, people who didn't have dignity, and people who who do not care whatsoever, for humanity. So that's number one. The other part is the lack of know-how. A lot of the same people do not have the set of skills that it takes, number one, to lead a nation. Number two, to manage a nation's resources. Number three, to make things work and grow GDP. A lot of them just don't know this. And so you don't expect anybody to give something they don't have. So that's why we must emphasize on putting our leaders in position through a proper electoral process and not through the cabal system that we have today. That's actually what's hurting our economy.
Now, if they don't know, that's a problem, but it's not as big as not getting people that know to do it.
Yeah.
Now, if your aim is to have money to steal, unless you should want to create more money. But it does
is the lack of know-how. A lot of the same people do not have the set of skills that it takes, number one, to lead a nation. Number two, to manage a nation's resources. Number three, to make things work and grow GDP. A lot of them just don't know this. And so you don't expect anybody to give something they don't have. So that's why we must emphasize on putting our leaders in position through a proper electoral process and not through the cabal system that we have today. That's actually what's hurting our economy.
Now, if they don't know, that's a problem, but it's not as big as not getting people that know to do it.
Yeah.
Now, if your aim is to have money to steal, unless you should want to create more money. But it doesn't appear they want to create genuine resources from what we already have.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, there's a reason that arrangement was made. Somebody is reaping benefit from that arrangement. And so that person doesn't want that to change. And so that's why you find that sometimes by some stroke of chance in Africa, all of a sudden you get a good leader. Somehow it slips through their hands.
It's supposed to be normal.
It's supposed to be normal, but that's not normal in Africa. So sometimes you find that a good leader comes into place, but they don't last. Either they die of some mysterious disease or something happens and they just die. And so the common man will say, oh, he died or he had cancer. It's not about cancer. If you understand world politics, you know that this Anglo-American connivance is what's holding the third world down. And so if you're the kind of leader that ensures that things work in your own community, your money stays in your own economy, you grow your GDP, you think your nation first. I'm not a great fan of Trump, but leaders like Trump are great leaders who think their nations first. Globalization is a good thing, but you have to also think about your nationality. What am I going to do to grow, the GDP, create jobs, make my people, comfortable? So these kinds of leaders do not serve the interest of this Anglo-American, connivance that I'm talking about. And so what they always do is find a way to eliminate these people. It happened to Thomas Sankara. Right? Thomas Sankara was a charismatic leader, young man who goes into the Gold Coast and decides to change the name to Burkina Faso and then began to preach, nationalism, began to preach, uprightness. And he began to do things right. All the excesses that were in government, he actually cut them. And so who did they use to kill him? His own best friend who grew up with him and sat on his mother's table and ate with him. That's the person's, it was that person's bullet that killed Thomas Sankara. And who was behind that? France. So when good leaders come into African nations to lead these nations, they usually don't serve the interest, of the European. And so they find a way to eliminate them. This morning I read on the internet that the president, the caption said that the only leader in Africa that's not a puppet to the white man just dies. And that's the president of Tanzania. Okay. You see? So that's really sad. You're going to tell me he died an ordinary death. Don't blame me of some conspiracy theories. But I know too much to know that people just don't die like that. And so leaders like that ensure that countries in Africa work. Another example is Paul Kagame. right? For me, he is number one in Africa. He is visionary, he's exemplary, and Nigeria must copy and paste what that guy is doing.
All right. When you paint pictures like this, I start wondering whether we will ever get out of this wood.
We can get out of it. We can get out of it, but it would start with us finding the right kind of leaders and ensuring that we put them in office.
What about the right kind of people?
How do you mean?
The followers seem to be suffering from the same disease.
That's right, because you see, there's something they say in Igbo, na mefia, waro, obulomenani. You see, that's exactly what happened in Nigeria. You know, they would put this leaders first, these corrupt leaders who's handed down corruption from generation to generation. And so people have discovered that there's an easy way of getting things done in Africa, and that's if you have money. You know, so the thing now is there's a rat race for everybody to make money. Everybody's chasing after money. And so we have actually turned our principles upside down. You know, everything but was listening right now. You know, you just go get the money. It doesn't matter how you get it. You come to the village, we make you the chief. We'll actually dethrone the Igwe and we'll make you Igwe. And so generations upon generations have discovered that if you have money, then things get done quicker. And so everybody's chasing after money no matter how you get it. And so that has corrupted the mindset of Nigerians. And Uche, sad enough, I've discovered that 95% of Nigerians have a corrupt mentality. We all sit down in our home and criticize Buhari and criticize this person and criticize that person. Now, but what do we do when we are given a little office to manage, when we're given a little position of authority?
Even town union.
Exactly. We abuse it. The head of the family, for example. Let's not even go to some, police officers or SWAMA or how do you call them, capital territory. We abuse every little position of authority that's given to us. Now, what does that say about us? That if we're given the chance to be the Buhari of our day, that we would do exactly the same thing Buhari is doing or even much worse. So it is a mindset that has actually eaten into the fabric of society, but it can be changed. Okay? Again, the academia has a role to play if they are decent people. The church has a role to play if they are decent people. Now, what we lack in our society today is decency.
I like the if.
That's right.
We just heard of a professor that gave awards for contract.
Yeah,
to the tune of 900 million.
Pencils and
erasers.
That's right. A couple of years ago, I heard a funny one. They used billions to share, to empower women and give them stoves. Billions. They are they're not up to 210 million Nigerians. So that is to say that if you took 1 billion and decided to share it amongst Nigerians, we'll all get a large chunk. But then you used multiple billions to empower women with stoves. Who do they think they're talking to? They must really think that we are that dumb.
All right. That's a good foundation for the discussion. Let's talk about infrastructure. Now, while all infrastructure is necessary, all meaningful infrastructure, it has to be prioritized. Now, have you ever wondered what informs the choice of projects by government most times?
Yeah.
You cite maybe a flyover somewhere where they don't really need it, or they need something more than that. Let's talk about what comes to your mind when you see certain projects.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered who is consulting for these people? How did they arrive at the decision of to do this and not to do these other ones?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I thought about that. It's like you took that out of my mind. I thought about that just a few days ago because I look at some infrastructural projects going on in this town or other towns in Nigeria, and you find out actually that these infrastructural projects are not informed by necessity, but rather motivated by the greed for money. And so if I have connections to the government, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to think up a project that's going to make me money and the person in government who's going to facilitate it. And so I go present this and I let him know what he stands to gain if he approved it. And so he approves it because of the offer that I make him. And then I presented it because it's an easy way for me to steal, government coffers. So most times, almost all the time, infrastructure projects are actually facilitated by the need to steal money. It's money behind it. I give you another example. A couple of years ago, I called a guy. This is not to to feel important, but I called a guy from the National Assembly who I happen to know, and I told him about a project because I was overseas and I called from overseas. I told him about a project that we call the Waste to Energy Project. Now, one of the things that we churn out on very large quantities, in very large
It's
quantities,
refuse.
is refuse. But we don't know if you go through Abba. When I was in the university, I went to Port Harcourt a lot. So every time I traveled that road and I on my way to Port Harcourt, I always saw this mountain, a heap of refuse, and they don't know that in itself is a resource that can be monetized. So you see, that's why I bring it down to lack of know-how. So they look at refuse and they look at a problem. How do we manage all this waste? And then it becomes a problem. Abba has never gotten it right ever since I was a boy, right? And a lot of other states have the same problem. So I called this guy up and I said, listen, I have this company. They don't need your money. All they need is partnership, right hand of fellowship. Yeah, come. We'll work with you. You'll provide land for you to build your factory. We'll facilitate everything. They are willing to invest their own money. I said to this guy, I need to reach the guys at Abia State. And so if you can give me a connection to one of the governor's, next, guys. And he said, okay, I'll give you, I won't mention the office and then we'll mention the name as well. So he gave me the number, but he said, mind you, these people don't think like you and I. They may not actually see the need for this project. Now, here was I proposing a project that will solve your waste management problem.
And will not cost them.
Won't cost you a dime of your money, but it will in turn create jobs and grow the state's GDP. Because there are chemicals that can be extracted from that waste that are actually needed in the manufacturing industry. And then what's more, you can convert all that waste to energy to power your state. You can also contribute it to the national grid, And I called this guy up, and this guy thought I was talking crazy. He made it clear that he wasn't interested and he didn't have time for all of that. I was shocked, Tuche. So you see, how can anybody not see the benefit in a project like this that you don't need to spend a dime of your own money? So it's either you're a thief, or you're greedy, or you're just so dumb, you're just so uneducated that you cannot identify benefits.
Now, another thing that is not always considered is the economic viability of projects.
Yeah.
You cite the projects maybe in the governor's local government.
Yeah, yeah.
So that it will look like he did something for his people.
Yeah.
And then after he leaves office, it becomes moribund.
That's
Nobody
right.
ever visits it
That's
because ab initio, the economic viability of that project was not considered.
Yeah.
I stand to be corrected. In some climes, they consider what it brings to that community in terms of economic gain.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Now, again, that's the other thing. There's a problem here. I service. Even mind not what I service. It's just like this bill. Sorry, I'm going to connect that. I just can't help but not talk about it. It's just like this bill that is being proposed right now. Lifetime pension or whatever.
Pension for past governors.
You can be sure that whoever sponsored that bill is just trying to be the governor's good boy. He just wants to be in the governor's good books, and so he sponsors the bill. It's going to go down in history that he's the one that took care of the governors, and so that means he's going to be taken care of as well. So a lot of times, a lot of these things are done, to please, okay. But then you also have to study the economic viability and the feasibility of every project, right? If I'm going to put how do you call it, a cement factory somewhere here in Udi, I need to ask myself, how far is the raw material going to be from the production facility? And so if that community does not generate the raw materials required, to produce a bag, the bags of cement that we're going to sell to our people, then that's not the right place to put that project, that industry, right? Because it's going to cost a lot of money to transport the raw materials. And at the end of the day, the end price is going to be too high. And so it cannot compete. It will not be able to compete in the market, right? So these are the kind of things that you should look into before you actually do any project. Before you do a road, you're just going to need to know, okay, what kind of road am I going to do here? Does this road require flyover? What's the traffic on this road? So if you have all these basic facts, then you can make an informed decision as to what goes where, right? But you see, these things are almost always never done that way. These things are done, purposefully just to make money. Okay, so there are people who are just good at bringing up projects, and then they bring up this project, somebody sponsors the project and takes his cut. Me, I take my own cut. At the end of the day, we may not even finish the project, So I don't know if I'm in line with the question that you're asking. It's high time our people begin to emphasize competence, because what's leading to all of this is that we have people who shouldn't be in government. I know people who became local government chairmen because they were friends, they were drinking buddies with the governor before he became governor. I know for a fact what I'm saying, And so you make somebody local government chairman because he was your drinking buddy.
But people have to appoint people they know.
No. Yes, there's a way to do that. That's why we have interviews. That's why we ask people to bring their CVs. So you judge people, you judge competence based on CV and based on certain questions. So when I invite you to an interview, I ask you certain questions and I throw before you certain problems and listen to how you hope to solve them. That would actually tell me if you know what you're doing, if you're going to be able to do the job that I want you to do. But you see, we just handpick people, and it doesn't matter anymore if they know what they're doing or not. We just put them in the office. They just have to be subservient to us, right? So he's going to be able to do what I want him to do, and so he's the right person. And so who suffers? The community suffers. Infrastructurally, the community suffers. Things are not done the way they're supposed to be done, because the governor or whoever it is decides to anoint a friend of his.
Let's look at the Southeast and what infrastructure. Now, looking at the 5 states of the Southeast, what infrastructure do you think will catalyze the developmental potential of each of the states?
Okay.
We'll take it one after the other. Looking at Enugu, for instance.
Yes. Okay, I'll answer it state by state if that's the way you want me to go. But there's something I think we should do regionally.
Okay.
Go ahead. That's going to also catalyze development in the individual states. So as a region, we must find a legal way, constitutional way, to either detach ourselves from the national grid, talking about power now, and then find a way, to provide 24-hour power. I've always said this. Now look at what the GSM technology did to the Nigerian economy. Obasanjo took the bull by the horn, and now we're wondering how we actually survived in the days when you didn't have the GSM.
Now that we have it.
Now that we have it, and so I remember then that a lot of times you needed to write letters and letters took about a month or so to get to their destinations and stuff like that. So you can imagine the kind of money and business that is lost in transit while we're waiting for the letter to arrive. And then the other times, the rich people in community, their homes became the call centers. And so somebody's going to call from overseas. They tell you 1 week ahead, I'm going to call you Wednesday next week by 4, so be available. And so that affected development in our society. Now, but this leader, Obasanjo, that's one of the things I'd say he got right, I'm not a fan of his as well, but he got that right. Now, that technology in itself, telecommunications, modern telecommunications, drove up the Nigerian economy, the Nigerian GDP a lot of ways, created jobs, it created direct and indirect jobs, it created billions of dollars for the Nigerian, nation, right? Now, you can imagine what power would do if you can provide 24-hour power for a people like the Southeasterners. Now, Southeasterners, yes, we have a lot of things going wrong for us. We have a lot of things that we're not doing right, this misplacement of values and stuff like that. But we're still hardworking people. A lot of us are still artisans. We use our hands a lot. We're able to create stuff. Now, the impediment to the kind of money we could generate in the Southeast is power. And so if you gave people 24-hour power, now the carpenter, if you ask them to pay you $50,000 a month, we'll be glad to pay you $50,000 if you're able to give him 24-hour power, because he'll be able to make so much money. A lot of times, 8 hours of the day, they don't have power. And so they're sitting idle and not making any money. You can imagine what would happen to the carpenter, to the welder, to the people who are in food processing, to different factories, the different SME companies. We had power. We will be able to generate a lot of wealth. So that is vital. If we can find a constitutional way to detach the Southeast from the national grid and provide regional, power supply that will be efficient and effective 24-hour, I'm not talking about anything less than 24 hours. If we can do that, that will drive growth in the individual state. What you would see is that people will begin to set up factories, small factories here and there will begin to rise.
The question is always, how will this be funded?
Has money ever been a problem in Nigeria? Money has never been a problem in Nigeria. It's how to use it that has always been the problem. Now, I can tell you right now. Now, our leaders are borrowing money from China. You see, people are getting it wrong. There's nothing wrong with borrowing money. But the two things you have to look at is the terms of the loan. Okay? Because people don't know this. IMF started it first, and a lot of these Western countries, European countries, started it first. They give you a loan, and they make you sign a paper that most African leaders never read. And there are clauses in this terms, in this contract, that actually allow them to take your GDP, take your proceeds in perpetuity, or even seize your national assets. And because our leaders are corrupt-minded, they don't read these things, they don't study them properly, they just go ahead and sign this contract. Okay, many countries like Sri Lanka, for example, has given up their seaports to China. So you see, taking a loan is not a bad thing, but you need to know what are the terms of the loan. Two, what are the loans going to be used for? And so if we are actually investing the loans properly, we should be able to generate the money to pay back the loans. So if you're borrowing money and we don't know what you're doing with it, and you're generating debt for unborn generations, why don't you take that money and put it in power?
Another issue surrounding power,
yes,
is there seems to be a politics around it.
Yes.
We talk about what has been done in Aba, for instance,
Yes.
By Professor Barton Naji,
That's
and
right.
all the politics surrounding it.
I know very much what's going on.
Now, don't you think that's something that will retard what you're proposing?
It shouldn't. Power is generated and transported into the national grid, and that becomes a vehicle that is used to distribute it. Okay? No matter how you generate power, it doesn't go to waste. It doesn't go to waste. It's only used when you transport it, right? So what I'm trying to say in essence is that is one. If you go to places like Japan, they've mastered a way of providing power for individual homes.
Okay.
But they also have a way, to generate it nationally. Okay. Now in Western countries, there's a way for individuals to generate power in their homes, take what they need, and then sell what they don't need to the national grid in exchange for money.
Okay.
So that is to say, it doesn't matter how many people generating. Important thing is to put it in the market and actually sell it and make sure it's used. Okay, so the Baton Naji has a project, Geometrics in Aba, shouldn't stop somebody else from generating, coming in and scaling solar energy. Okay, but apart from that kind of politics that you're talking about, there's another politics, where people are actually lobbying government officials to make sure that power is not provided, so that fuel sellers can continue to make money and generator importers can continue to make money through those.
All right. Ajuri is online. Good morning, Ajuri. Hello. 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 All right. We'll get back to Ajuri. Hello. Hello.